Morning to everybody. The Veterans and Military Affairs Finance and Policy Committee will come to order. If members and people in the audience would join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, appreciate it.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today's agenda is pretty small, and yet we've got quite a few testifiers. We have a supplemental budget request from the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs, and we also have a bill authored by Senator Howe, which will be presented. So if we could have the MDVA presentation, Commissioner Larry Hirkey to come to the testifier stand and identify himself and proceed with his testimony. We welcome you this morning. Thank you for being here. And I see that Mr. Ben Johnson is here also. So welcome to both of you. Identify yourselves and proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I am Larry Hirkey, the Commissioner of Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs. And I appreciate today to get an opportunity to present to you in person, which is wonderful to see your faces again and be able to be here in the Capitol. The presentation I have today is a supplemental request for the Governor for Veterans Affairs for the state of Minnesota. This is a little bit larger request than I've had in the past, but I think the items here you're going to look at, see are very worthwhile and timely as it relates to veterans. Are we going to be able to bring present as well, sir? Will they be able to see the slides?
They have printout.
Oh, they have printout of the slides. Okay, all right. Agency profile is the first item there. Mission, of course, is to serve veterans, their dependents, survivors, by connecting them with federal and state care and benefits they've earned. We do this through the 5 state veterans homes. We have currently 3 veterans cemeteries, and we serve 304,000 veterans. That number, Mr. Chairman, keeps going down. We keep losing about between 6,000 and 8,000 veterans a year, and most of those are World War II, Korean War vets, and we're starting to see a significant amount of the Vietnam veterans now are leaving us annually.
Commissioner, is this is the presentation that you're using? Okay, yes. I'm following. I think other people are kind of looking, is it on the screen or is it on here? So
that's what I was saying.
We got this here, so it's no problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
I do want to also report and provide an update on the 3 new veterans homes. I've reviewed, had a meeting yesterday on it. We're at 20% completion across the 3 homes. No significant issues as it relates to their construction. In all cases, we have vertical elements and roofing going on the first sections of homes, so that's good news for us, even through the sort of rough winter, especially in the Bemidji location. Our veteran cemetery is also off and running, and one of my presentations today will actually be a good news story. Looks like the veteran cemetery will be done much quicker than we originally thought, and therefore we're going to need some staff to actually open that here in the next year. So you'll see that request here shortly. If we can go to your page 3, then sort of an overview of the recommendations that I'm going to go through today. The first one is a service bonus for a 20-year period for service during the post 9/11 time period during the 20 years of GWAT. The next 3 items after that really have to deal with getting to functional zero as it relates to our veterans. We've been doing a great job of reducing the number of homeless veterans in Minnesota over the last few years. I would finally like to put an end to veterans homelessness as we've known it since we've been working on this since 2014. I think these last items will help me get over the top and be able to achieve that. The 5th request there is a Fargo VA Medical Center. It's a Fisher House. I'll explain more about that and why I'm asking for something in a Fargo VA. The next 2 are actually changes or increases, one to the Veteran Service Officer grants, and the second is an increase to the veteran service organizations. And lastly is a request for Redwood Falls Cemetery to create an operating fund to be able to open the cemetery itself. If we can go to page 4. The first request is a one-time request for $40 million. This would be to provide a veterans bonus program. This would be eligible for the service members that have served post 9/11 for the last 20 years. This is historically, the legislature has appropriated money for these types of recognition of veteran service in major wars to include World War I, II, Korean War, Vietnam War, and most recently the Persian Gulf War. In each one of the previous conflicts, there has been a monetary bonus, and we've adjusted the bonus for inflation and so forth where we think it is probably most appropriate. During that 20-year time frame, we had, according to the VA, 48,000 veterans that have served during that time frame. And the intent here would be provide 3 levels of bonuses to those veterans. The first would be to those that just served during that time period, but received no campaign medals. So they were in service to their nation during those 20 years, but did not deploy overseas or were not involved in conflict directly. That bonus, we're recommending a $600 bonus for those individuals. The second level would be those that actually have received a campaign or expeditionary medal. That means they've actually went overseas, they've been involved in conflict and are in the war zone. We're recommending a $1,200 bonus for those veterans. And the last would be a $2,000 bonus for those that were KIA or deceased due to the conflict in Iraq or Afghanistan. We believe this, just to give you some numbers, it'd be about 97 families that we'd be providing that $2,000 bonus to. We believe there'd be about a little over 25,000 that were directly involved and had that got either the expeditionary or campaign medal. And lastly, the number that served just on some type of federal service, but maybe not in the war zone, would be a little over 26,000. Our intent with this is to try to get 85% of the people bonuses. We think that's important for one, to provide the recognition to them, but also we would like to gather the information concerning these veterans. We probably have the least information on some of the newest veterans actually. And before, this has really helped with outreach. I know I talked to people during after the Persian War conflict, and they used those rosters and still are using those rosters to be able to contact and provide outreach to those veterans. So it does provide something back to us to be able to help those veterans long-term, which I think is actually important. I've done some work as far as inflation and so forth. I think the numbers are appropriate. I can tell you that the Commander's Task Force is very much involved. In fact, they suggested that this go on at this time now that we're at the end of the 20-year conflict. They felt it was the right time and it's the right thing to do for our veterans in Minnesota. If we can go to page 5.
Mr. Hirkey, we have a
Yes,
question here.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate it. Just a couple of questions regarding that, if I may. First and foremost, do you have any sort of timeline in mind when it comes to these bonuses and when they'd be paid out? And then secondly, how do you plan to go about processing these? Do you already have the information that you need? Are the veterans going to be required to do something in order to ensure they get the bonus? And last but not least, the recent members of the Minnesota Army National Guard that found themselves in Afghanistan during the evacuation, will they also qualify for this bonus or something similar? Thank you.
Commissioner Hirkey.
3 questions, and I didn't write them all down, but I'm going to try to hit. So, Mr. Chair, Senator Duckworth, I'm going to start with the last one. Yes, the most recent, I think first the 194 would be eligible for that. I think the time frame, we had not developed an exact time frame for the cutoff, but we plan to do that here as it relates to what's going on in DOD and so forth. But so yes, they would be eligible. Second, how would we contact them? We do have some information. We did distribution of about 7,500 coins through appropriation that you provided for us for the 9/11 event. So we have some information there. We also, of course, have information on some of these veterans as it relates to their educational help or assistance, specifically higher education and certificates that they've got through the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs. So we do have some contact information, but our main process would be going through the county veteran service officers and getting them involved in this process, because we think it's important that we link those county veteran service officers with those veterans in their areas. So we see this as another benefit for both the veterans and the counties to be able to help do that. And we would lastly ask the veteran service organizations to help us also to identify veterans that are part of their organization, so we make sure everyone is aware. And we think because of that, we can get a much higher distribution of these funds than we've had previously. And I forgot your first question. Timeline. Okay, and thank you for asking for that. Our intent here, and I have it in my notes actually, distribution would start on July 1st of 2022, and we would distribute these funds through June 30th, 2024. We would use existing systems. Actually, we're going to modify our educational system that we have for distribution. It's set up to accept DD-214s, and I think it's the W-9s or whatever need to be gathered in order to distribute these funds. That system is already set up with a small modification. We can use it to actually do this bonus. So I think we're well prepared to do this without any additional administrative expenses.
Senator Duckworth, follow up. Senator Uyghur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, thank you for the proposal. Strongly support. One question I had regarding definition of Minnesota veteran. I do know of some lifelong vets that served, but for whatever reason, maybe they moved to their cabin in Wisconsin or maybe further south. Are they considered a Minnesota veteran if they in those hypotheticals?
I think, Mr. Chairman, Senator Uyghur, the intent here would be as long as you are a Minnesota veteran, you at the time that you're receiving it. I know in the past, there's been, I think it's indicated that you had to be a Minnesota veteran at the time that you entered service. And our intent was if you are a Minnesota resident and you're a veteran and meet these criteria, we would pay the bonus to you. So that's our intent.
Senator Uyghur, anything else?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I assume that clarification's been vetted with the various service organizations and everyone's on board with that.
Very good. Commissioner Hirkey, continue.
Mr. Chair, Senator Uyghur, we'll make sure that we have that vetted, but that's a much more liberal interpretation than has been given previously. And that's why we also believe we can get a higher amount of veterans that can actually be eligible for this.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The second item then would be on page, I think your page 5, I believe, at least in my page 5 here. Tenancy supports the landlord engagement activities, requesting in FY 22-23, 1.1 million, and in 24-25, 1.95. The intent here, there's two parts to this really, and this goes to the functional zero issue as it relates to veterans homelessness. Today, we have about 248 veterans that are homeless in Minnesota. That's part of a churn that happens annually. We usually place somewhere between 450 and 500 veterans in safe, secure housing each year. So it's an extraordinary amount of people that are actually getting taken care of by a small group of people, both nonprofits and my staff, and also veteran service organizations and others that are helping us. A total of 55 stakeholders that are involved with this whole process, to include local governments. This would get at, we've done some experimentation in this area. There's 3 different areas in the landlord tenancy support area. Landlord incentives, we would be able to give landlords incentives to take high barrier veterans. So a lot of those 248 people that are on our list have been on our list for quite a while because they have multiple barriers. They may have a felony. They may have had bad rental issues. They may have potentially mental health issues. they may have other legal issues that are precluding them from being successful in gaining housing first. So they've been in temporary housing or transient housing for quite a while. And we would like to be able to move some of these people out of that status and into a permanent housing situation. So the landlord incentives would provide either a one-time incentive for those that have minimal barriers, and the ones that have the maximum number of barriers, which is based on a scoring that we do, would receive up to, the landlords would receive up to $1,000 per month for the first year to take a chance on these veterans. So these would be people that don't normally meet their requirements for getting housing. Okay, because they're going to probably be 3 or 4 things that they normally would require of a tenant to have, that we're going to be helping and securing and making sure that these people are taken care of. So the landlord's willing to take that chance on the veteran. We're willing to reward the landlord for the first year. And again, the worst case would be up to $1,000 per month. Many times based on the actual score that the veteran has as it relates to their barriers, it may be much less than that. The second area is in vacancy relief, and that specifically there would fill in the time between offsetting the time when there's actually a vacancy between veterans. So we're moving from one veteran to another, but we want to make sure that we keep that rental unit for veterans. So we would fill in that time period, whether it be, because it takes a little while for the VA to come in to do the survey of the room again, even though there was a veteran in it before. It takes a little while for that survey to be done and so forth to be able to put the next veteran in. We would like to make the landlord whole and pay for that period. That's been received well. We've done it as a pilot with some agency funding that we had, and it seems to work well, and it's well received by the landlords. And it makes sure that we keep all the units that we've had for veterans in play and the use for the next veteran that comes along. The last item is a risk mitigation. And again, we've used this to a small extent as a pilot, and we would cover up to $2,000 beyond the security deposit if there was any damage done to the facility or something that the veteran did as it relates to their time or occupancy in the unit itself. Again, just having this has been a benefit. We've seen more landlords that are willing to take a chance on our veterans based on the fact that we're willing to stand behind that veteran and ensure that they're doing the appropriate things. The staffing part of this would be through a third-party nonprofit. It'd be competitively bid, and the intent here would be provide additional support to both to the landlords and actually to the individuals themselves, but creating that relationship to make sure that, and that's what most veterans or most landlords want. If they take in 5 veterans, they don't want to have to talk and deal individually with 5 veterans. They'd rather just deal with one person that can be sort of in charge of, or, taking care of those veterans. And this has worked quite well with a couple companies that we've been able to make inroads with and get more units through this type of a process.
Commissioner Hirkey, we have a question from Senator Newton.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. As you go through this, how many veterans do you think you would be able to accommodate with this funding?
Right off well, we believe that we can it will help and assist the 400 to 500 that I described before annually. And then the intent here is to work on what we think are going to be about a little over 300 veterans that are in this, that have the high barriers. So this would specifically really be focused to find those additional units beyond the amount that we normally have, and to work with those 329 veterans we're actually projecting that would actually have be assisted by this program.
And
Senator
Mr.
Rubin.
Chair and Commissioner, if I'm not mistaken, you're talking about $1,000 a month in subsidy for the.
That would be Mr. Chair, Senator Newton, that would be for the highest barrier folks that score over 100, which means they probably have 3 barriers or more. And they're significant barriers. They're going to be felonies and other issues that, like I said, most landlords would never take in a tenant like that. But we found that they are willing if they're provided some type of incentive. This would be the worst case scenario would be for the first year, a total of $12,000. In many cases with people that with lower scores, it would be just a one-time payment of maybe $1,000 or $2,000.
Senator Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioner. So you would require the veteran to work, I assume, if they go into an apartment. Because in most cases, especially in the metro area, you can't find an apartment for $1,000. And it might work in outstate areas where you can find a place for them to live. But in addition to the cost of the rent, you're going to have to pay for utilities, you're going to have to pay for food and that sort of thing. So, how do you pick up the balance of that? Is it through requiring the veteran to have a job at the same time?
Commissioner Hirkey.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Newton, so the $1,000 would actually go to beyond either the HUD-VASH voucher that the individual would bring to the table, or the state voucher, which your committee helped and the legislature helped us with during the last session. We call the new state voucher MVEST, MNVEST. So the landlord would be receiving both items for taking a chance on the veteran themselves. As far as it relates to the daily expenses for the individual, most individuals to begin with are on, they would have access to food stamps or some other way to be able to provide. We do provide employment, and that's part of the wraparound services that come both with MVEST and HUD-VASH. And the intent is to get employment as the next step after we get housing. So that's something we help concentrate on, and also the federal VA does as part of their time. The intent would be to move them away from the voucher long-term and make them self-sufficient through the long term. And what we found, getting back to the request for the landlord incentives, after the first year, most landlords are satisfied with the tenant. That's what we found. And the incentives are no longer required after the first year. It's just to take that chance during that first year that they're creating a relationship between the tenant and the landlord.
Senator Newton, follow up.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner.
Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good to see you again, Commissioner Hirkey. The question I have is, you're going to get these FTEs through a third party. Is that going to be a third party, or is there going to be multiple third parties throughout the state? Or are you concentrating in certain areas? Because different landlords operate different in different areas of the state. How do you plan on working that?
Commissioner Hirkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Howe, my intent is to put a competitive RFP that the company or nonprofit that picks it up has a statewide footprint, so that we're not dealing with multiple entities in this case. If I had to, we could possibly split it, but the intent would try to find one that has the capacity to do statewide services.
Senator Howe, follow up. Senator Commissioner Hirkey, I know that back in 2015, there was a bill that was brought forward, and you're concerned about mental health. And it was the bill was proposed to put a mental health facility in Beltrami County, which would be Bemidji, if you were to focus down on. And that right now is where our veterans home is being placed. I'm wondering if you were open to working with the new veterans home and something of a facility that could come in to deal with mental health and also veterans at the same time.
Mr. Chairman, we're a step ahead of you there. We're working with the federal VA right now, and with Secretary McDonough and the folks that run the vet centers the operate vet centers in Minnesota. Right now, we have 3 vet centers, one in Duluth, one in St. Paul, and we have another one in Anoka. but we do not have many vet centers throughout the middle part of Minnesota. If you were to draw a line right down the spine of Minnesota. So our request right now to the federal VA is to have a vet center in Bemidji, which would, the focus is on mental health, helping families, and I think it's just perfect for what's needed. Also St. Cloud, and the third one to be in Mankato. And the intent would be provide services to those Minnesota veterans that are unserved right now by the vet centers that are existing in Minnesota or in surrounding states. And I think this would be a great benefit to those regions. And it's something that I'm seeing as a commissioner. Mental health for our veterans is key importance, especially as it relates to suicide prevention and that transition from, active duty into the civilian. It's a big jump. It's a lot of stuff going on in a fairly young person's mind. And I think this is really required.
Thank you. I look forward to the next few years.
Yes.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Just as closure, I think the third party, so it'd be looking for a statewide nonprofit to be able to pick that up. I think by putting it in a nonprofit instead of a state employee, it gives me more flexibility and latitude to reduce the requirements or whatever as time goes on. I do see this as a surge required over the next 18 to 24 months. And then after that, these services may not be needed at the same level. We can move to the next page, which is the low barrier affordable permanent supportive housing. This is not transitional housing. We have many people that help us provide transitional housing throughout Minnesota. And we're doing pretty good in the area of transitional housing. But the intent here would be to provide permanent housing that is affordable for, again, looking at those veterans that have the highest barriers. This would be us actually looking for housing up to 100 veterans that would be in this category. Today, I have 43 veterans that are on our high barrier that have those scores of greater than 100, which would be immediately eligible for this. Many of these folks, committee members, they're not used to being, they're used to being in a tent somewhere or in a car or something like that. So unique situations for each individual is a little bit different. So the way I see this housing working out for us, we'll probably have some housing options that would be accessory dwelling units. We find that the people like to be alone, so forth, where we're putting a separate housing unit on a existing lot where there's a main primary house already. And an accessory housing unit, our dwelling unit would be actually co-located. We're going to look into multifamily residential units and also single room occupancy development where you have a single room that's just for a person to sleep and that they go to a separate kitchen somewhere else and they have separate spaces that they share in common with each other. So we see a combination of all three this area. This is a departure for us. We have not got into this before, but I see it really as a need as we go forward to ensure that we can house everyone that needs to be housed going forward. So the focus here for this request is actually in the 7-county metro area. We've already created situations where we're at functional 0 and 7 of 10 continuums of care. The only 3 we have left is Hennepin County, Ramsey County, and St. Louis County are the 3. And we think we're about ready to declare in St. Louis County. We've been able to move some of the folks that have been there the longest that were not placed. We've finally got them to move into permanent housing. So we believe we're going to see an announcement on that shortly. And so it really comes down to Hennepin County and Ramsey County for the bulk of the chronic veterans that we've had that have been on the list the longest. So these different options we'll be looking for as it relates to veterans going forward. Again, in this case, we'll be looking in this case for MACV to help us and assist us. They've done a lot of work in this area as it relates to especially the accessory dwelling units. They've started the process of working with the city of Minneapolis and St. Paul on these. So we'll look to them as it relates to property management and some of those items going forward. Our intent would be to provide the support similar to the way the state of California is doing with their veteran homeless issues, and what they're doing conversions of fire stations. They're doing new construction. They're doing accessory dwelling units and so forth, just like this. So we're looking at all the above answers to the solution to these veterans that are most difficult to place. And like I said, I have 43 veterans right now that have that super high score. We have other veterans that would probably fall into, easily into these locations, and this would just help us with some of the hardest, most difficult veterans to get them placed in safe, secure housing.
Commissioner Herkey, are the most chronic or the most hard to work with, are they older veterans, or are they mostly new veterans just coming out of Afghanistan or Iraq or situations like that?
Mr. Chair, I think we see a little bit of each. It seems to me from just looking at some of the demographics, there's a grouping of those younger veterans, but then there also is a grouping that's out there a ways. Maybe they've fallen on hard times or lost employment or whatever it might be. They're older, maybe my age. They just a situation where things have not been going well for them based on their jobs or whatever. And so we see it across the board, but I would say there is definite sort of grouping in those two areas, the very youngest, and then those that are probably in their 50s, 60s would be most common.
Senator Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Herkey. I just doing a quick figure. This runs to about $142,000 per unit. And who is actually going to own these buildings? Would that be MACV? Would it be your department? If it is MACV, we're giving them, this money to own these things permanently.
Commissioner Herkey.
Mr. Chair, Senator Newton, the intent would be to move it to the third party. In this case, MACV. The intent would be to have them enter into California did 55-year leases requirements for them for full transfer, and but it'd be our intent to move these facilities to MACV, have them provide the operation day-to-day management of them, but they would be under contract to put veterans in for the entire time of that contract. I think 50 or 55 years seems about appropriate to me, and that's what was worked well for the state of California.
Senator Newton.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner, has there been any consideration given to actually giving the housing to the veteran himself or herself?
Commissioner.
So that rather than having it go to the third party, that the facility be turned over to the veteran?
Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Newton, I had not considered that. I would take it under consideration. I think some of the challenges is the fact that some of these will be multi-family residential units. It would be difficult to maybe potentially transfer, the individual space, apartment or whatever, but that's something I can look into. I don't believe that's the model that California is using right now, but we can definitely look into that. I think that would make most sense probably with the accessory dwelling units, where it's sort of an individual entity amongst itself. But we could consider that going forward.
Good.
Senator Newton.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner, I think, I appreciate you looking into that, because I think home ownership would help a lot of these veterans. And if they actually own the home with the department holding on to the lease or holding on to some sort of a deed in the event they default on the house, that we'd be better off long-term. So thank you.
Commissioner Herkey.
Chairman, Senator Newton, again, I'll look into that. I think that's an interesting concept. Probably would be a requirement. They'd have to, be well as a tenant in it for a period of time to demonstrate that they could take care of the unit and had an ability to do maintenance and so forth. But that is something I will look into.
Please proceed. Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to agree with Senator Newton, because I believe in that way, those veterans would actually be, it's a way for them to gain wealth. And I think that's the biggest piece. If we want them to actually establish and gain wealth, home ownership is where that's at. So I agree that I think that's condoing those out, if whatever it takes, I think would be an interesting application to actually have them gain wealth instead of continuing to not be able to establish that and continuing to be in what I consider apartments to be transitional housing all the time. So, thank you.
Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, I wonder if, I represent Dakota County, or at least a good portion of Dakota County, and they continue to be a big provider of housing within the county for folks that need it, especially folks that need a little bit of help. So I wonder if, when you looked at this program or structuring this program, if you took into consideration partnering with counties as well. And the reason I ask is our counties have a lot of resources. And sometimes we can contribute funds and they're willing to contribute funds as well. And we find that we can do a lot more projects, or that our efforts can go a lot further. So I wonder if that's something that was given consideration or could be given consideration in the future, is how do we leverage the great folks that are working at our counties to do this as well, and then potentially help run these programs or maintain these moving forward.
Commissioner Hirkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Duckworth. Yeah, we have considered that. In fact, the model that California has tries to maximize all the local, specifically looking for land, from the city or the county, any tax incentives, of course, for the construction, if it's new construction or renovations. So we are going to look for that to make these dollars go the furthest possible, and we will be looking specific to the counties, and I've already engaged in Minneapolis. I'll be soon engaging here in St. Paul to get them on board with these processes and to get them specifically. I've asked them for land to begin with, but we'd be asking for other help and assistance as we go forward.
Follow up. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think in a matter of time, I probably should move on, but this is an important part. What I want to say is this is an important part. I didn't think I would have to come to be a landlord or get involved in housing. For some reason, I always thought the society would come and help us out. I've brought the governor, and we've had 150 landlords in the room. We've had even people put up their hands, and then when it comes time to actually give us the units, the hand goes back down again. So I'm just asking for some help here to get the hardest of the hardest, to make sure that we get all the veterans taken care of, and we make sure everyone gets a home. So that's where this comes in. We can go to the next page, which is increase engagement for outreach activities and temporary housing options. So before we were talking about permanent housing, what I'd like to say is we've done well recently. We've received money from the VA as it relates to hotel rooms. And I didn't know that it was going to have such a great impact on us. It's allowed us to get down. I think we were down to 18 homeless people outside of temporary housing, and all 18 of those people just said that they don't want to be in temporary housing. But we moved a whole lot of people. I think it was like 70 or so people into hotels when the program became available through the VA. And what we found is that we can move people faster because we know where they are. They're clean, they're safe, they were out of COVID. Had a huge amount of positive effects on our ability to house people quicker. And so we'd like to continue that. The VA, and now their program is coming to an end. Some of the other programs that we were helped through the county that we were working with, those are also coming to an end. So I would ask here that you would assist as it relates to being able to extend that program through the state, at least for a period of time, until we can bring these numbers down for veterans. So it'd be, again, an assistance as it related to the hotel rooms and being able to find that temporary housing that we need to be successful. Again, this is to try to place veterans within the 90-day period, which is required by United States Interagency Council on Homelessness to meet functional zero requirements. So it's worked in the past. I'd like to continue it, at least for a time period here as we go forward, to make sure that we can get to functional zero. The other part of this is an outreach. We want to make sure that we have greater engagement as it relates to individuals, making sure that we're getting to encampments, shelters, that we're getting involved with peer supports that are needed to engage individual veterans. In this case, we're asking for contracted FTEs to help us to do that. This would help us to move people quickly from being homeless into a situation where we can get them to temporary housing, and then through the hotel rooms, quickly move them into the permanent housings. And again, this is proven. You probably don't know this, but we were at 230 veterans on our homeless registry. We went up to like 360 or 70 during COVID. And because of these types of activities that we were able to fund through VA money, we were able to bring the number back down to 248 today. And we're on a downward trend. So I know these supports work. I'm asking for you just to help me for a while longer to keep this temporary housing option available and to do greater outreach to the veterans throughout Minnesota to make sure that we're finding everyone and their needs are being met.
So Commissioner, how does it feel to be the landlord?
I didn't, Mr. Chairman, I didn't think I'd be here today, but this works. So I think we should continue it, and I just ask your support in this area. There's not any questions. I'll go on to the next item. The next item is, okay, you're gonna say, Commissioner, why you're asking for money for Fargo VA. So I'll just answer that right up front. Fargo VA serves 18 counties in northwestern Minnesota, a total of 26,000 veterans. I think there's less than 100 veterans in all of North Dakota, if I remember right. So a significant amount of the people that are treated at the Fargo VA are Minnesota veterans. And the Fisher House, if you're not aware of it, it's about 13,000 square feet facility. We have one here near our Minneapolis VA. It's a place that families of the veterans go, the dependents, you know, you can bring your kids, your spouse or whatever, if you're going through treatment. I do believe, I wasn't able to confirm, but I've been told by veterans that they've actually, when they've done outpatient work, they've been able to get housing at the Fisher House at no cost to them. So it's a great benefit to the veterans, and this one would be located within, I asked the hospital administrator where it's located. He says he hasn't found a place yet, but they're gonna work with the city of Fargo to get something very close that's walkable for the individuals. This is an $8 million project. It's currently set up through, again, all the money is originally comes from private sources. And then the long-term maintenance and support for it actually comes from the VA. So it's you have to build it, but once you build it, the VA will help and assist as it relates to continue operations. They've been able to raise $6.3 million. And I can tell you that the state legislature in North Dakota provided $1 million in ARPA funding, I believe is what they used for their contribution. So that as part of that 6.3 million, the state legislature in North Dakota provided 1 million. Just based on some quick math, I felt our part of that would be about 500,000. This would be a one-time request that would go directly to the funds for this Fisher House. And again, for helping those veterans and their veterans families that are in Northwest Minnesota. I can tell you that corporations like Shields and some of the other corporations that are based in North Dakota have also contributed. So it's a mixture of public and private dollars for this. This would get them a little bit closer to meeting their $8 million requirement. They do plan on construction starting in 2023. And I believe this particular one, I have the handout here, but I think it's 19 suites that would be available, and their throughput would be over 20,000 people served each year in the Fisher House going forward.
Commissioner, any thoughts of something like this for Bemidji? Just talking out loud here.
Mr. Chair, I could see about that. Usually they only locate these where they're paid for by the VA as far as operations. If they're in they'd have to be in close proximity to a VA medical center or VA hospital. So St. Cloud could potentially be an option, but
Sure. Thank you. Please proceed.
all right, we can go to the next item, which is the change to the County Veteran Service Officer grants. Requesting additional funding of $450,000 per year. The intent here to increase funding as it relates to MACVSO, which is the overarching organization that all the CVSOs actually belong to. Currently, we fund $50,000 per year. We'd like to increase that to $100,000, and this would allow them full-time assistance and so forth. And we got an expert in the room here that could talk more about that. But I think this is important going forward. The second part is more Commissioner Hirkey's part, and that would provide $400,000 a year on a competitive basis. So if you are, besides getting your normal distribution of somewhere between 7,500 and 27,000, if you're someone large like Hennepin County, you could, as even a small county, you could ask for a one-time grant request. You would compete competitively each year for the dollars. Let's say if you wanted to expand transportation services, or if you had a specific program for outreach, potentially it could be something to enhance your homeless programs or help to the homeless folks. It could also be something that maybe assists and help if they're maybe expanding the office or something like that, adding an assistant CVSO could help you to establish the requirements for that position, something that would be out of the ordinary and would help that county to assist their veterans within the county itself. And I think this is important. It's my understanding the last time that we've increased this was in 2013. So we were not increasing the distribution to each one of the counties necessarily, but we're making this competitive funds available each year.
Commissioner Hirkey, I know that in Rochester, there is a dental clinic located inside the courthouse. I think it's the county courthouse there, designed for low income or people like homeless people that don't have the money to do that. And Wright County right now is in the process of building out their dental clinic similar to what's in Rochester, to have that available to the surrounding counties plus Wright County. And I'm wondering, in contacting maybe the CVSOs or things like that, there might be a working relationship there to help these people who are veterans that are in need of dental work. And that's a key part of everyday health situation. So just asking.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if this funding would specifically probably be in that area, but I could think of other potential help and assistance as it relates to that. I know when we established our dental clinic at Minneapolis, we had V4V helped and assisted, with establishing that. We had Delta Dental and a lot of other entities help out with that. I think for this, it would be for something that normally probably would not get, the county wouldn't have the money for or assistance, but something that's maybe critical to helping the veterans in that county. I think again, it'd be very broad and it could be transportation related. It could be, like I said, homeless for outreach, trying to do something as it relates to outreach. I do think having this competitive thing, I've had many CVSOs ask me if there's additional dollars available. And this would be those counties that are more aggressive and want to really get into this and expand their capability to serve their veterans. This would allow them to do that.
Senator Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Hirkey. Who would administer the program? Would it be the department or would it be the association itself?
Commissioner Hirkey.
Mr. Chair, Senator Newton, the intent would be the department that's done the grants in the past. We would continue to do those going forward. The only thing I would have to do, I'm getting in a situation where I have one person that manages grants. I probably will have to have at least another half FTE just because all the activities, not just this one, but the other grants also have a little bit more help, maybe a half FTE or something like that to help out as it relates to that. But it'd be our intent to do the competitive ones. We could have CVSO actually involved in the process of determining on the competitive basis. I think that would be great. have their input on that. We could have potentially the staffer from that or someone they designate to help us with that. But the intent we would continue to administer the grants through MDVA.
Senator Newton.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner, I would suggest you look at having the state association actually administer the grants. You know, they're closest to working with the county veteran service officers and could assess the needs, I think, even better than the department itself. So just a suggestion. Thank you.
Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Newton, I'll check. There's 19 different regulations on grants that I have to follow through the Department of Administration, but I'll see what's within the realm of possible, and I will look into that.
Please proceed.
Thank you very much. I think we've covered that again. So two different ways. Again, 50,000 increase annually to MA's CVSO, and then 400,000 available on a competitive basis for every county within Minnesota. If we go to the next sheet is increased grants to veteran service organizations. The last change for the appropriation here was in 2009. We currently have 353,000 per year is provided in the most recent budget appropriation. We're asking for an increase here of 147,000 per year. And that's a 42% increase. We believe this is annual grants to the Congressionally Chartered Veteran Service Organization. I should indicate to the committee that the Vietnam Veterans Organization is no longer existing within Minnesota. So there would be a change because of the fact they've decided to turn in their charter to the national. As there still are some chapters available throughout the state, but the state organization itself decided to no longer exist by vote internally. So this would provide funding to the other congressionally chartered veterans organizations in Minnesota. The intent here would be to continue to distribute the grants based on two factors. One is a set dollar amount per member of the organization. The second thing is taken into consideration is a dollar amount based on the percentage of the claims, the VA claims workload, which that particular veteran service organization actually has. So it's two parts, and we've always done it this way. We're asking to actually put it into statute so that it's clear. This is the way that the amount will be distributed. And that is the intent. So in most cases, I believe for the 8 chartered organizations we still have left, the actual annual amount would go up. I would guess in each case. I can tell you that in some cases, the organizations, their membership has been reducing each year, but I do believe overall everyone here will more than likely have an increase. But I think this is just really looking at inflation over time since 2009 and providing a little bit more funding. I've had several of the veteran service organizations through the CTF ask for this. And of course, the CTF is approves this. In fact, they suggested that an increase should go forward to the governor. So he's supporting their request here. Thank you. The next item and the last item is the Minnesota Veterans Cemetery of Redwood. As I said in my opening comments, we were originally thinking we were going to open in the summer of 2023. It now looks like we're going to be able to do a soft opening for Veterans Day, probably do our first burial actually on Veterans Day of this year. And we were able to do that because the contractor that actually picked up the contract is a larger contractor that had more capability than I think the architects felt that a normal contractor would have. And therefore the project is going to move faster than we first anticipated. And that's why I had not asked for operational costs previously. We'll be hiring on 6.75 FTEs, a total of 8 positions. Some of those positions are seasonal. Therefore, the reason that it doesn't equate to 8 FTEs. Again, when we look at a soft opening in November of this year and probably in the spring doing the dedication of the ceremony once I can get some grass in and everything else is up and the site is, roads are completed and so forth. The rest of the operating costs are things that you would normally associate with a cemetery, like utilities, fertilizer, maintenance, fuel, those type of things as it relates to it. I do get all the, as part of the VA funding and the funding that you provided for me to finish the cemetery down there, we're able to get all the equipment and so forth purchased. So that's not gonna be a problem. So these are just true operating costs that I'm looking to cover annually at an amount of $830,000 per year. And so we'd be 1 year in 23 and then the full biennium, of course, in 24, 25. Last is just a summary of the requests. The biggest one, of course, being the bonus. Of course, if we do not use the bonus, if I can't meet my 85% penetration, which I'm going to try as hard as I can to get there, because I think technology will actually help us in this area quite a bit over past time periods. But the other three items that are after that are related to becoming functional zero as it relates to veterans homelessness. I do believe we have a plan. I think we have the best plan in the nation, to be honest with you. There hasn't been any states through the last 3-4 years that have been able to get to functional zero. We'd be the 4th state in the nation to do that. My intent is to put a full press on this. I'm meeting with everyone. I'm meeting with counties. I'm meeting with cities. I'm meeting with landlords. Whatever it takes to get this done. I think the help and assistance you can provide through these 3 programs will be the last push that I need. And in a lot of ways, it'll allow me, especially with the low barrier permanent supportive, I can put my most difficult cases in that type of housing, which is my biggest concern, to be honest, overall, is, with the folks with the highest scores, how am I going to take care of them? I do believe that every veteran deserves a home, and that's what we called our program, putting it together, and I plan to get there. I just need a little help and assistance to make sure we get there. The Fargo Medical Center, I think that's the right thing to do, and it shows our demonstration towards that. I would ask that, for the county veteran service officers and the veteran service organizations have always served us well. This is a chance to adjust the numbers for inflation and so forth and get them back on track. And lastly, the good news with the Redwood County Cemetery, just to get the cemetery open. Again, it's about 20,000 veterans that it would serve in the southwestern part of Minnesota. I have a lot of folks that are even asking to be transferred from other cemeteries. They have their loved ones interned. So I know there's a great demand and assistance. I'd like to get it open as quickly as possible so we can go forward. Thank you for allowing me to present supplemental items, bigger than I usually do, but I think all these are appropriate for this time.
Thank you, Commissioner Hirkey. I see that your sidekick there is returning to Zumwalt days back in the 70s when we allowed Navy people to have their beards. So
I think he lost his razor somewhere. I don't know.
we could probably afford one for him. Senator Howe.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I used to sport one of those back in my Navy days, so I can relate to that. Commissioner Hirkey, 2 questions I have back on the Veterans Bonus Program.
Yes.
You're going to take care of those that were KIA in action, killed in action. How about those folks and those families that have members that served and died in this interim before this bonus was available? I can think of 5 of my service members that served with me that are no longer here, either through suicide or through heart attack and disease. Those families eligible if they can produce a DD 214 or how are those be handled?
Commissioner Hirkey.
So, Mr. Chair, Senator Howe, this would be subsequent to the time that they were in the military. Is that what you're talking about, Senator Howe?
Yeah.
I guess I hadn't considered that as, being eligible, the way that we have it written up right now, that I had not considered that. I take your suggestion as it relates to that area.
One follow-up, and the other piece that I have is this, are we going to plan on this being a taxed bonus program or a untaxed, tax exempt program?
Commissioner?
Mr. Chair, Senator Howe, I wrote it in there that'd be untaxed.
Senator Duckworth.
Mr. Chair, thank you. And thank you for sharing all the information with us, Commissioner. It's very helpful. To build off of Senator Howe's question, and I apologize if you mentioned this and I didn't catch it, the $2,000 level for a bonus for veteran killed in action, does it also go toward veterans who were wounded in action during that time as well?
Commissioner?
Mr. Chair, Senator Duckworth, the intent there would be the people that have the actual service medal would be at the lower level.
Mhm.
So the intent was only KIAs are those that have actually perished serving in theater. I know we had some people that had safety issues, some that had heart attacks and so forth. They would be eligible, and we've counted them in the count of 97 that we have currently that we're aware of. I'm sure that number is probably higher. So they would actually get the higher amount. The WIAs would actually just get the one step down as it relates to the dollar amount.
Okay. And then one
Senator
follow-up.
Duckworth. Go
Thank you,
ahead.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Duckworth? Oh, done?
Did you have something to add to that, Mr. Commissioner? Or?
Yeah, so it's all a dying service. So it's similar to what I was saying, no matter what the circumstances, if it was KIA or if it was, it could be, something that happened to them. They died walking to the mess hall, or if they had a heart attack, as long as they're serving and their death was during their service in theater,
Mhm.
the intent would be to pay at the highest amount.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, one more if I may.
Senator Duckworth.
Thank you. This is kind of a more of a curveball question, but we did talk about, state veteran cemeteries, and I had a constituent call me just a couple weeks ago and ask, I don't know if this is true or not, so I figured I'd pose it to you. It's okay if you can't answer it now. I'd like to follow up if possible. But he explained to me that if the spouse of a veteran wanted to be buried in a state cemetery with their serving member, that spouse would have to pay a fee to do that, whereas that fee is not assessed to the spouse of a veteran who's interned in a federal veteran cemetery. So if that's the case, I'd love to follow up with you and see what we can't do at the state of Minnesota to maybe make it so that our spouses who want to be buried with their veterans in state veteran cemeteries aren't having to pay a fee to do so. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner?
Mr. Chair, Senator Duckworth, it is correct. There is a one-time fee that is required for spouses in the state cemetery. I'm not quite sure what, on the federal level, what the regulations are and the requirements there, but I can definitely get back to you and indicate where we are currently. And I guess we would just need some help and assistance as it relates to if we were to offset that, if we were to without a fee in turn, because we get no reimbursement from the VA for the spouses as of right now.
Thank you.
Senator Howe, follow up?
To this point, I know I had a bill to this effect a few years ago, and I know that if it's a case by case basis, that the commissioner, if it's a money issue, that the commissioner can override those fees, but that was the reason why the fee is there is, so we've fought this battle once before, so
Senator Uyghur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, I know we focused here on the priorities, increase items, but I was wondering if you could comment about veteran resources at the post-secondary schools. I'm on the bonding committee. We had a chance to see a number of the veteran resource centers, which is a very important part for vets that are just returning or re-engaging in the workforce or for the training. So any comments or particular needs that could potentially be further pointed out as we navigate our budget?
Commissioner?
Mr. Chair, Senator Uyghur, the intent, I think most of my outreach areas are fairly well funded. We have presence at all the larger universities, whether it's one day a week or sometimes it's someone there permanently, so, five days a week. I'm not aware of any immediate needs in that area. I think for the most part, we're taking care of our veterans in those veteran centers or veterans offices to the best of our ability. I've been able to get to a few of them. COVID kept me in a lot, and I plan on getting more of them. But I'll listen and I'll see if there's anything that is needed when I finish my rounds of the major universities. But so far, all is well, I could say, and I think we're really taking care of the veterans on those campuses.
Senator Uyghur, follow up? Senator Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Herkey. In talking about the veterans for the both housing and bonuses, are we talking about only veterans with good papers or does it include all veterans?
Commissioner Herkey.
Probably in this chair, I'm probably gonna, I believe it is honorably served is the requirement, but I can get probably an answer for you here in just a second. I have a group of people that are on over my shoulder that are helping me out to confirm that.
Senator Newton, follow up?
Yes, and I'm primarily concerned with the veterans who are homeless and may not have good papers to make sure that we address their needs as well.
Commissioner?
Mr. Chair, I'll get an answer for you here shortly, or I'll provide it after the fact.
Does not include former service members, it's specific to veterans.
But he's asking about honorable service.
Right,
Okay.
and that's a requirement.
Okay,
Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Newton, yes, as it's written today, it requires honorable service.
Senator Newton.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner, I have somewhat of a problem with that because I've had two cases recently where people who have served for a long time, whether it was a question of mental health or abuse of a substance of some sort or another, on like their third or fourth enlistment, were thrown out and have bad papers as a result of it. And these people need help. So I would hope that we reconsider and look at this as on a case-by-case basis, especially when dealing with our homeless vets. You know, a lot of these people are there for, they've gone through a lot of trauma during their tours and have just not adjusted both to the service at the last tour and then when they get out of the service. So I'm just asking that we give some additional consideration to that.
Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Newton, take that into consideration. I will staff it again and we'll see what impact that would have and maybe seek some other input from others as it relates to that. I understand where you're coming from and I think it is worth consideration.
Members, any other questions? Commissioner and your assistant, thank you for presentation today and look forward to working more on this as we go into the session and look forward to meeting some of the requirements that you're asking for. So thank you. We have another presentation by Senator Howe and I appreciate the opportunity to have you before our committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, committee and Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the time.
You're welcome. Senator Howe. Senator Howe, welcome to committee. And if you'd like to move your bill, do you have an amendment or anything to your bill at all or?
No, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to move Senate File 2635 to be in front of the committee.
Senator Howe moves that Senate File 2635 before the committee and look forward to your presentation and those testifiers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senate File 2635 makes changes to the Reenlistment and Commissioning Bonus Program. Currently, these programs prohibit any bonuses to service members that have more than 12 years of service. And so the way it used to be, and with the old retirement system, is that once you hit 12 years, they figured the hook was pretty much set and they were going to reel you into 20 years. Currently now with the change that you can with the different retirement system that they have, they can just take that retirement with them. It'll just be a reduced amount. So it's kind of like a 401k. So that hook isn't set near as deep. And with the current employment environment that we're in, it's tough to keep these senior NCOs and officers in because they have, they can take that retirement with them at any time and move into the public sector. So we need to do something to continue because we're bleeding and hemorrhaging our NCOs and our officers in that time period where we really need them. And so what this would do is remove that 12-year, I guess, limit and allow us to offer that bonus program throughout that career over that 20-year mark. And maybe you'd keep more guys in, you know, there's not more, not as long as I stayed in, but at least you'd keep them in to maybe that 20-year mark. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to go to Mr. Kerr, the testifier.
Thank you, Senator Howe. Appreciate the presentation. Sounds like we have a toothless hook, no barbs. Senator, we have Mr. Don Kerr to come in presentation. Mr. Kerr, would you identify yourself and proceed with your testimony? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I am Don Kerr, the Executive Director of the Minnesota Department of Military Affairs. And Senator Howe did a superlative job of describing the bill. I would like to articulate that we really don't have a huge problem with this right now because of the way that the Army or I guess the Department of Defense implemented the system, or perhaps the Congress implemented the system. But we do foresee a time in the near future where folks who are eligible for what was called the blended retirement system would be at a decision point where they could leave without and take their retirement with them. So it's less of an incentive for them to stay. Again, we don't anticipate necessarily implementing this expansion of the bonus immediately, but we did feel it was appropriate to make the law correct so that the Adjutant General had the authority to implement those steps should it become necessary if we do start seeing real problems with retention in our mid and senior grade non-commissioned officers. And with that, sir, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. Appreciate the testimony. Anybody in the audience that would like to testify on behalf of the bill along with it? Any questions, members, for the author of the bill or for the testifier? Well, you guys are all safe. Senator Howe, if you'd like to renew your motion.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to renew my motion that Senate File 2635 be recommended to pass and sent to general orders.
Senator Howe makes a motion that Senate File 2635 be recommended to pass and sent to general orders. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign, no. Motion is passed and the bill is on the way to the floor. Thank you, Senator Howe. Members, we don't have anything anymore. We're right at the deadline for time. Committee here, thank you for coming today. Thank you for the presentations and thank you for your questions. And with that, the Military Affairs Committee is adjourned.